Our first panel today is a topic near and dear to all of us, or you wouldn't be here. The IAIS, the next 5 years, moderated by Dean Cameron, NAIC International Insurance Relations Committee, G Committee Vice Chair and Director of the Idaho Department of Insurance. Dean's going to be joined by Jonathan Dixon, Secretary General of the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, Siham Ramli, Director of Communication and International Relations at ACAPS in Morocco, as well as Susan Greenwell, Senior Vice President and Head of Global Relations at MetLife. So please join me in welcoming this panel.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm honored to be able to moderate this panel. It was interesting. Well, these lights are bright. It was interesting to listen to that first presentation, and it reminded me of that there were three types of people: those that can count and those that can't. And obviously, I can't. Nonetheless, I'm honored to be with you. You know, they say that time. What do they say? They say that time flies when you're having fun. Apparently, I've not experienced that, but apparently that's true. And I don't know that fun is what I would describe the last 5 years, right? We've had just a little global pandemic and a few natural catastrophes and a little bit of political and social and military unrest in the past 5 years. And that's been a challenge. And we're now marking the end of our International Association of Insurance Supervisors Strategic Plan and Financial Outlook, or commonly referred to as the SPFO. And soon we'll get to start a new chapter. So we thought it would be very interesting to talk about what the future holds and the overall process. You know, it's interesting to me as I think about the last 5 years. The insurance industry, in many ways, survived and did so because of appropriate supervision and regulation. And so this becomes, in my mind, very, very critical, because many of these issues aren't going away. They'll either compound or evolve, and then there will always be new issues, right? So we'll get to perhaps talk about a little of those. So this morning's panel, we thought it would be helpful to start first by reflecting what has been accomplished in the last 5 years. Secondly, then talk about the process in developing the strategic plan moving forward. And then third, we'll maybe get into looking forward. But we want to start with a question for those of you in the audience. If you would go to your Slido, and I don't know whether you can pull that up, or the question. The question for you is, as the IAIS moves into its next 5 years, what will be the most important objectives? And you can see the answers that are there. All of the above seems to be tied there, but we'll take a look and then refer back to this as we get a little further as we walk down through. So let me, in the interest of time, while you're still voting and expressing your thoughts, let's start with some questions, and I'm going to start with Jonathan first. As the current SPFO wraps up at the end of this fiscal year, and I know you were very involved in the drafting of it, how has the last 5 years been different from SPFOs that were preceding it?
Very good. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation to be part of the panel and to be here at the NAIC International Forum again this year. It's always a fantastic event. And as you were talking there about, you know, what a 5 years it has been with some twists and turns in the road. I was thinking about that, and also reflecting a bit on Commissioner Mays' opening comments about, there have been some tough times, but I think what got us through it as a sort of global community of insurance supervisors is that we did all pull together and continue to collaborate and find solutions when sometimes when things did look tough. So and the NAIC, and to say thank you, because I think the NAIC has been a big part of that. So I wanted to start with that note before we got into a bit of the history, the history lesson. And we're talking about how does the strategic plan that preceded this one. So we're going back to 2014 to 2019. And then I realized I was there for that. And it's when you start to realize maybe you are a little bit of the furniture. In that comparison, I think the first comment I would make is some parts were actually less about change. There was a continuation in this current past 5 years with the 5 years before that. So if you think back, we have had a decade of a very intensive standard setting period. Of course, that was all driven by lessons from the global financial crisis. I think, can be frank to say that perhaps the IAIS and its standards were found to be, wanting in places coming out of lessons from the crisis, so including a need for much more focus on group-wide supervision, much more focus on macro-prudential issues, and we have spent 10 years fixing that. I mean, the first 5 years were incredibly intensive, and if you think back, in 2019, we had huge milestones because we published a completely revised set of insurance core principles. We also published and adopted ComFrame, so the common framework for the supervision of internationally active insurance groups. In other words, a higher standard of requirements for big global groups, and we adopted the qualitative aspects of that in 2019, so the governance, risk management, etc. And we also adopted our holistic framework for the assessment and mitigation of systemic risk. In other words, our macro-prudential framework and the standards that go with that as well. So that was a huge lift, 2014 to 2019. And that has continued into this 5-year period because, of course, we've been busy finalizing the quantitative element of ComFrame, which is the insurance capital standard. And we're almost there. So that was the continuation theme. What were some of the changes between 2014 to 2019 and 2019 onwards? I would say two things. One is, I think, a much bigger and more effective emphasis on our global risk assessment part of our work. We put an incredible amount of energy and effort into developing what we call our annual global monitoring exercise, which, if you think about it, is incredible because it covers more than 90% of the global insurance premiums, the global market, and we get incredibly rich data, both at an individual insurer level and at a sector-wide level, which really empowers and drives a very strong empirical approach to assessment of vulnerabilities and risks and trends at a global level, which can be a really helpful complement to domestic national level macroprudential surveillance efforts. And in December 2022, the Financial Stability Board endorsed our holistic framework and found it to be a much more effective approach to tackling systemic risk in the insurance sector compared to the old approach of identifying global systemically important insurers. So that was one big change, I think, that we have been very successful in achieving. And then the second one is, I would say, much more of an emphasis on, how do we support our members in adapting to some really powerful global trends. And of course, that covered our work on climate change, on cyber, on fintech, etc. And I think we can all collectively within the IAIS be very proud of the fact that we, in some areas, I would say on climate change, we have been a leader amongst standard-setting bodies appropriately so, because climate change is such a key topic for the insurance sector. But we've done incredible amount of work in terms of both understanding it, getting the data on these issues, but also developing guidance on effective supervisory practices in the face of these trends, and building capacity on that. So I think that's been a great part of the last 5 years, because these are global challenges. They affect developed markets, they affect developing markets, they are cross-sectoral issues. So I think the IAIS has a unique role to play in helping to address those issues.
Yeah.
Thanks.
In many ways, that's why the IAIS organization as a whole is so important. This allows us to be able to look at those things and address them and collaborate together and learn from each other. Siham, from your perspective as an IAIS member, what changes have you seen over the past 5 years, and how do you think the association has done?
Well, thank you, Dean. First of all, I would like to thank you and thank the NAIC for the invitation to this incredible forum in the beautiful city of Washington, D.C. I'm very happy to share the stage with Susan and Jonathan to discuss the IAIS future perspective and priorities. As Jonathan mentioned, the current SPFO has helped to achieve important milestones, and the IAIS has made significant changes in the last 5 years, both in terms of its products, services and support to members, but also in the way that it operates. Concerning its high-level goals, the IAIS has made good progress. For example, we have seen significant enhancement to the way the IAIS undertakes its risks monitoring and assessment, both in terms of the quality of outputs, such as the Global Insurance Market Report, the GMAR, but also the process and engagement with members and stakeholders on this work. There have been changes on the way the IAIS supports its members through sharing good supervisory practices. We have seen the establishment of a number of forums through which supervisors can exchange views, such as a risk-based solvency implementation forum, which provide a guidance to members, in particular EMD on RBS schemes, or the Financial Inclusive Forum, the fifth, that continues addressing key issues and developments impacting financial inclusion, including from the EMD perspective. Also, the IAIS made some significant strides in the implementation agenda, including the depth and the breadth of its implementation assessment activities and expanded capacity building. This last point is in important demand from the EMD, and I came from an EMD market, and IAIS has been working with its implementing partners to meet it as best as possible and to cover different areas. In terms of stakeholders' engagement, the association has also taken steps to improve engagement with members and stakeholders, including the use of different means of engagement to increase participation and inclusion, such as the effective use of the virtual and the hybrid meetings. Finally, I would like to highlight that the IAIS has conducted its operations with a focus on D&I, and my colleague was here yesterday to talk about this. And the IAIS has worked to implement it to foster an environment in which everyone has a sense of belonging and is respected and valued. And I am confident that the next SPFO will further strengthen this approach.
Great. Well, we hope so. Susan, the current SPFO notes the need for the IAIS to continue to evolve and to make changes and as they address changes that are going on in the global insurance sector, keeping alert to trends and also to achieve its overall mission. From your perspective, how well do you think the IAIS has done evolving at the same time meeting the missions of protecting the policyholder and contributing to our financial stability?
Thank you, Dean. First, let me echo my thanks and honor to be part of this distinguished panel. As I was getting ready for the panel last night, I was trying to remember when I actually began following and engaging with the IAIS, and speaking of being the furniture, Jonathan, my first IAIS annual conference was 2008 in Budapest.
Me too.
Yeah, so I think we're following the same path here. And, you know, the breadth of the mission of the IAIS and the diversity of its membership means, of course, the IAIS can't reinvent itself every year in response to market developments. But I think with the guidance of core objectives and strategic goals, the IAIS has built in the ability to adapt and evolve to market developments over time. And I'll give a couple of quick examples, some of which have been mentioned. First, the holistic framework, key tool for tracking global market trends and providing empirical and analytical insights for the GMAR, the Global Insurance Market Report. This is exactly the type of activities-based approach to risk surveillance that the industry has consistently supported. And the IAIS has adapted the tool each year, expanding data collection to drive insight into emerging topics like climate risk, for example, or cross-border reinsurance. This data-driven approach is a really sound basis for tracking emerging trends and also for supporting dialogue with stakeholders. Looking forward, you know, we think the IAIS can continue to develop this tool, and one example is, you know, the lessons from the NAIC's revised liquidity stress test framework might be relevant at the IAIS level, particularly in the individual insurer monitoring analysis. Another example, which you mentioned, of the IAIS adapting in recent years is climate risk. Climate risk was mentioned in the 2019 strategic plan, but the activities and focus on climate risk has really intensified over the period, and I think the IAIS has done an excellent job leading the way, as Jonathan mentioned. The IAIS convened sort of resources and expertise needed to develop insurance-specific views on this topic and represented those views quite well with other relevant organizations. And there are plenty of stakeholders in the climate risk space. We definitely encourage continued collaboration with the other international organizations and competent authorities that are responsible for climate-related risk and disclosures, as this, you know, is going to continue to evolve. And, you know, ideally, IAIS leadership in this space can, you know, help drive a more harmonized global approach as opposed to, you know, market-by-market measures. And so that's something we hope to continue to see evolve in the coming period as well.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. So I wanted to ask each of you the same question. We've got 6 months left in this current SPFO. What do you think, Jonathan, what do you think are the biggest accomplishments of the IAIS during this SPFO, this current one?
I would say twofold. So So first of all, I hope I'm not counting my chickens yet, but of course, by the end of this period, we will have adopted our global insurance capital standard, so the important quantitative element of ComFrame. I think, referencing what will be part of that success, to use Commissioner Mazur's language, is that we all cross that finish line together, and I'm convinced we will find a way to do that. The second one, I think, is maybe a sort of a revitalization, maybe, of our bonds as a community of global supervisors. I think there was a real appreciation for that during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the fact that we had each other in the global community to kind of lean upon for sharing challenges, advice, and I think part of the revitalization has also come through this change in agenda, with the real focus on these key global trends that impact all of us, developed and developing markets. So we are a very broad-based association of over 200 members. But these are topics that unite us: climate risk, cyber, fintech. They affect all of us. And I think that's really brought the community together. And another big aspect of that, I would say, is also that these are topics where collaboration with stakeholders, including, of course, our important insurance industry stakeholders, is much more natural on issues like climate risk, cyber, fintech, where we're all learning, we're all adapting, and I think supervisors and industry participants have common objectives in these spaces. So I think another big accomplishment is I would say, big step forward in member and stakeholder collaboration on the agenda.
Yeah. And I'm going to let's go to you, Siham, on that question.
Actually, it's very important. The collaboration help to really look in the same way. And I can tell you that for EMD market, we did a great job in regard of capturing the needs of emerging markets, because the association would like to be inclusive, and if we would like to be inclusive, we have also to look about what's happened in other countries, specifically emerging markets. So the process of the SPFU was really transparent, and they gave us the possibility to better address the needs of members. And as you may know, we have more than 200 participants from all jurisdictions from all over the world, and it gives us a possibility also to look at the real need regarding the capacity building issue as well. So for me, it was a great opportunity to share. We take time to think about all this, and it was a real opportunity for all countries to be part of this work.
Great. Susan, what were the biggest achievements?
I mean, standard setting was definitely the top of the agenda, and I think the finalization of the ICS will be a hallmark achievement of this period. And one other, I think, is the finalization and approval of the holistic framework, which is an insurance-specific, tailor-made risk surveillance tool that I think will serve the IAIS and the industry for years to come.
So let's come back to you, Jonathan. Can you give us an overview of the process of developing the next SPFO?
Yeah, I can say essentially two things. It was a very structured process and also a very consultative one. So, in terms of structure, we established a strategic plan and financial outlook task force, which was made up of EXCO members. So we really have had, if you like, senior leadership in driving the development of our strategy. And then in terms of consultation, this has been a huge element of the development. So you'll remember in 2023, we issued a survey both to our members and to our stakeholders to get input. We then have, took it, and we got a lot of input, I have to say. So then we took some time to work through all of that very systematically and come up with some draft ideas. We had September last year, we had a quite intensive kind of strategic planning session for the whole of EXCO to go through all of this material. Then you will recall in Tokyo in November, we had a series of member and stakeholder roundtables to get additional input. And then over the last 6 months, we've really taken all of that on board in crafting an initial draft strategic plan that was supported when our EXCO met in March. And then last month, we held a series of member and stakeholder webinars to share where we were, actually a fairly developed strategic plan, but also an opportunity to get any final thoughts or input on that. So I think we're in pretty good shape in terms of, I can say, strong consensus amongst our EXCO, our leadership, that with where the strategic plan is heading, we'll look at where there might need to be some tweaks or clarifications coming out of the final feedback. But then we'll take it next month to our EXCO for approval, and then to our broader membership for adoption in the third quarter of this year, and then publish it before the end of the year.
It's been an interesting process.
Yeah.
And I'm anxious to hear Siham's perspective because, first of all, you were on the task force, so you were heavily involved. You are a well-respected member of the executive committee, a vice chair, but you're also representing sort of the emerging market side. So what's your perspective of how it's gone?
So first of all, I can tell you that I'm very lucky to be part of this work. And as I said, we have a lot of members coming from emerging markets, and the needs are not the same. And the challenges also are not the same. So whether in terms of the insurance sector or supervision, but also in practical terms, such as how supervisors are resourced and their capacity to be involved in the work within the IAIS activities. So the SPFO development has taken all these differences and diversity into account, and through this process, the IAIS has made a concentrated effort to balance the needs of a diverse membership. In terms of the issue, it will focus, for example, by supporting greater participation from a broader group of members in its risk assessment framework, and by supporting members through sharing good supervisory practices. And I had the responsibilities to bring the voice of emerging markets to this task force.
Yeah, great. Susan, I'm interested from your perspective. Obviously, there was a I don't remember what we called it, but a hearing, if you will, an overview of the draft SPO that was held and involved much of the industry. How did the industry receive it? What was your perspective?
First of all, we operate in 40 countries, and it's hard enough for us to get ourselves, organized around common goals. I can't imagine what a task it must be for the IAIS. From a stakeholder perspective, we really value and appreciate the efforts that the IAIS makes to engage us in the process. And it's particularly helpful for industry to see how the IAIS is framing the priorities going forward. Because this is such a high-level plan at this stage, industry input may not be as robust as you can certainly expect it to be as you get into more detail, and we have an opportunity to provide more of our specific expertise. But so far, we've been very appreciative of the transparency of being brought along through the process and understanding, what are the framing principles that we can expect the IAIS to be focused on going forward.
Yeah. So we started the discussion with a question that we posed to the audience, and that was what is the most important objectives for the next 5 years moving forward? It looks like monitoring key risks and trends has 39% and is leading above all of the above. So obviously, a lot of folks feel like all of the issues here are important objectives. Maybe monitoring risks and trends may be the most important. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the answer to that question. I'm going to start with you this time, Susan. And each objective has its own focus or its own core. Are there any focus areas in particular that may be more challenging for the association as compared to others?
I think having focused extensively on standard setting in recent years, it seems like this may be a prime window to focus more intensively on the objective of building resilience and addressing insurance protection gaps. And just to emphasize that point, and I know that's something it's been a theme of the conversation over the last 2 days. The mortality coverage gap in the US is $12 trillion. About 100 million Americans, or 40% of the adult population, say they're either uninsured or underinsured. From a retirement perspective, we've seen, employer-provided defined benefit pension plans disappearing in many major markets, and including in the US. Life insurance companies who are well versed in managing mortality and longevity risks are certainly well placed to fill this emerging gap. And as long as the regulatory frameworks are sufficiently flexible to provide insurers incentives to do that. The annual pension gap, as JIFIA reports it, is estimated to be about $1 trillion on an annualized basis. Similarly, JIFIA estimates the protection gap for cyber losses to be $900 billion a year. And on the health side, the gap is about $800 billion annually. So there's plenty of evidence to support, focusing on the supervisory coordination that can help address the protection gaps in collaboration with industry. And we certainly believe the IAIS can play an important role in providing useful resources to support supervisors in addressing the protection gaps.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love President May's theme and the NAIC theme that way, and because we know our citizens are better off when they're insured, right, or when they have access.
Absolutely.
Siham, there are similarities between the previous SPFO and the one moving forward, but there is one new plank or ideal, if you will, and the new theme in its quote, supporting insurance to serve its societal purpose of building resilience. Can you share your thoughts as to what that means to you?
Right. Thank you, Dean, for your question and for giving me the opportunity to talk about this strategic theme. I think that many elements of this theme build on existing IAIS work, such as the promotion of access and affordability of insurance, or the role of insurance in closing protection gaps. In the next SPFO, this theme will continue to advance the IAIS financial inclusion and fair treatment of customers' agenda, but also build on the IAIS work of recent years focused on protection gaps. Underlying this theme is the idea that insurance exists strengthen the resilience of society. Insurance regulators can play an important role in supporting and guiding insurance in achieving the work that they have to do. The IAIS will also focus on action to support insurance supervisors' efforts in addressing protection gap. This would include things like undertaking data collection and analysis, including tools and practices to quantify and assess protection gaps, and capacity building and sharing good practices related to supervisory responses. Finally, it is important to highlight that by including this theme in the SPFO, the IAIS has taken on board the feedback of AMD members, where challenges of financial inclusion, low insurance awareness, and insurance protection gap are often more acute.
Mm-hmm. So, Jonathan, there's another change between the previous SPFO to this one. We go from a high-level goal to more operational priorities. Can you explain the change in approach? It's nuanced. What are the particular drivers underlying this operational priorities approach?
Yeah, happy to cover that. And maybe if I can take a minute before then just to talk a little bit around the question on the screen, because I thought it was interesting around the core objectives. My answer to this actually would have been all of the above, which might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but I just wanted to clarify why I would say that is because what we have set out in the strategic plan is that we see these four key core objectives, or sometimes we call them core functions, as being sort of very interrelated and part of a cycle of what we do. So, we do the risk assessment. Then how do we address that? It's either through setting standards or supervisory practices, and then we assess whether those have been implemented. And then we learn from our risk assessment and our implementation assessment whether we need to do further enhancements. So so that's why I would say all of the above, but certainly I think in the period ahead, probably more tweaking standards, more focus on risk assessment and implementation assessment. And I also wanted just to say I agree very much with both Susan and Siham about the significance of our third strategic theme that we've added this time for the next 5 years, which is in supervisors supporting the role that insurance needs to play in building societal resilience. And this is really a bit of a watershed moment in a sense that recognition that supervisors can be part of the solution to broader societal challenges and want to play a part of it, and very much along the line of Commissioner Mays' theme for the year. So, and that strategic theme we support through each of these core objectives. So, as Siham said, we will collect data to understand protection gaps. Mm-hmm. We will then see whether there's anything in our standards. When we look in terms of an enabling regulatory or supervisory environment, is there something we need to tweak? We will build guidance for supervisors on how they can be active parts of the solution to dealing with protection gaps, and then we will also provide implementation support with our partners to provide training on that. So, that's in a nutshell. But that wasn't my question. But on the operational priorities. So yes, in the strategic plan we're just finishing, we did have a high-level goal 5, which was around operational efficiencies and effectiveness. I think that was at a high-level goal level in this plan because I think there was a sense 5 years ago that there maybe were some operational things that could be improved. And it was made a specific objective. I think where we are now is that we've made great strides on that, and we've really made some operational improvements. But we do but we do recognize that operational efficiencies, etc., really do underpin everything we do. And so we actually have almost like an underpinning foundational focusing on our operational abilities and recognizing that even though we've achieved a lot, there's room for continuous improvement. So we identified 4 priorities. One is taking strength in our differences. So that really is continuing the commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in how we go about our work. And we've made, I think, some really big strides on that. We put out a clear statement on our vision on DE&I. Over the last year or so, we've built diversity, equity, and inclusion principles into our processes and procedures and governance. And we will continue to build on that over the next 5 years. And we're looking at a range of additional initiatives that we can do in that area. The second one is to act sustainably in how we operate, and a commitment to being sensitive to the environment, our environmental footprint. And we adopted our environmental policy in 2020, and we've taken active steps in terms of guidance on reducing our carbon footprint. And since 2022, we've been annually reporting on our performance on that, and that is something that will continue into the next 5 years as well. The third one is continuing to strengthen our engagement with our members and with our stakeholders. And last year, we put out a revised stakeholder engagement and consultation policy, which I think further strengthened and I think improved our practices on that front. And I think that's been a sort of upward trajectory for us. But we will continue, as I said, continuous improvement motto there. We'll also look actually do we need to broaden the stakeholders that we engage with, because on many of these themes, like fintech, for instance, there's a range of stakeholders we probably haven't been engaging that much with on these topics to date that we really should be engaging with. And then the last one is just to continue to look for areas to implement efficiencies in what we do. And of course, a big part of that is leveraging of technology. So we'll be looking in a focused way on that as well.
Yes. Oh, great. Siham, I'm interested in your thoughts, both from a perspective from being from Morocco and also from being an association member, executive committee member. What are you most excited about on this next SPFO?
So, Dean, I don't think that I can be impartial in answering this question. It's very rewarding to contribute to the work of the SPFO task force, and I'm actually excited about everything. But maybe concerning my point of view from my perspective and from my country, the Kingdom of Morocco, we are keen to work on topics such as financial inclusion, fair treatment of consumers, macroprudential supervision, or the transition to the risk-based solvency regime. We are happy to see that the IAIS, through its next SPFO, will address all these themes. For Morocco, the issue of protection gaps, particularly in relation with the natural catastrophe, is crucial. And we were tragically reminded of this last September with the deadly earthquake that hit our country. The issue of capacity building and sharing supervisory practices is crucial as well in Morocco, as it is for many countries of the African continent or the MENA region. It's also important. This is reflected in the next SPFO, which sets out several IAS priorities towards EMD reduction and further strengthen its ongoing commitment to helping its EMD members. Our association draws its strength from the richness and the diversity of its membership, and it's exciting to see the association move forward in line with the needs and aspiration of its different members. As a vice chair of the executive committee for EMD issues, I look forward to the exciting work we'll be doing at the next SPFO, in particular with regards to capacity building initiative, working to support strategic themes such as improving the financial inclusion agenda or increasing the focus on protection gaps, and to contribute in the ongoing progress that IAIS is making with regards to its commitment to continuous improvement, in particular with respect to D&I theme and the association objective to enhance D&I across the organization, or other topics such as operating sustainably and strengthening engagement with members and stakeholders and implementing efficiencies. Last but not least, I'm really excited to continue working with the incredible IAIS Secretariat team and the leadership of my friend Jonathan, which is doing an amazing job with all the members by supporting team in any possible way. The IAIS Secretariat has worked very hard with members to come up with a very exciting and ambitious SPFO, and I am sure that it will enable the association and its members to move forward of several priority topics.
Wonderful. So, Susan, what can the industry do to contribute and help? And second part of the question is, are there any asks from the industry to the IAIS?
This is my favorite question, by the way.
I'm sure. And we only have 30 minutes left. No, 14 minutes left.
First of all, I think the primary role that the industry can play to support the IAIS is to continue to serve as a dialogue partner, and we're deeply invested in that. We engage robustly with regulators in all of our markets, and we want to continue to do that with the IAIS as well, because we recognize, supervisors can play an important role in developing a robust and resilient, or supporting a robust and resilient insurance market. And conversely, sometimes some market dampening can happen through supervisory practices. And so I have a couple of thoughts, three, from the sublime to the mundane. First, I will say we very much encourage a continued focus on the holistic framework and the other macroprudential initiatives such as the GMAR. As I mentioned earlier, we think this activities-based approach to systemic risk is the most efficient way to bring attention to risks in the system and to prepare for the shocks that we know are inevitable. In the process, we encourage the IAIS to take an outcomes-based approach to counter risks across markets rather than a rules-based approach. We think this approach can also help to accommodate for the best practices that have been developed within jurisdictions and which account for the unique characteristics and profiles of individual jurisdictions. So that's a sort of high-level thematic. Please continue the focus on the holistic framework and macroprudential initiatives. A mundane suggestion is, in order for us to participate fully, it's helpful for us to know who in the IAIS is involved in certain policy initiatives. And so we would love to see a little bit more transparency and working group participation and in line with the FSB. I know in the past, the IAIS would publish all of the members of a particular working group. And right now, I think it's just chairs and vice chairs. So very, tactical suggestion, but that's one we would love to see. And then, building on the capacity building comments that Siham is making, we also agree fully and have a suggestion there. And I'll bring the suggestion to life with a few examples. We've talked about the vast protection gaps that are posing a challenge for all of us, and we know we can work together to shrink those gaps. We see these gaps in every type of market where we operate, from the most developed economies to emerging markets, and we think that IAIS can play a really important capacity building role with the regulatory agencies. In particular, efforts to reduce conflicts of interest, enhance the competitive environment, and foster a level playing field certainly would create a more vibrant insurance sector. And I'll bring it to life with a couple of examples. We see one instance of a mammoth state-supported insurer competing on very uneven terms with private sector companies. We've seen regulatory agency leaders have personal ownership stakes in multiple insurers. We see regulators using dividend approvals as a tool to try and manage exchange rate policy. And we see instances in which regulated rates are set below market levels, driving insurers out of markets. And so we think the IAIS has a role to play here and could undertake an effort to identify the core drivers of vibrant, competitive markets to support the provision of insurance across demographic groups to address the protection gaps. And this obviously would help not only insurance regulators, but policymakers more broadly in government and in legislative bodies to understand those structural underpinnings of a vibrant market. So those are a few of our suggestions, and thank you for the question.
You bet. I have a question for you, Jonathan, but I'm noticing the Slido questions that are coming up. And I thought maybe we do have a few minutes before we get to the last question that I want to ask you. It seems like a lot of votes are getting for you to state who your favorite EXCO member is. And as long as it's not Gary Anderson, I think we're okay with any choice.
It's clearly Siham.
That question sounds like career suicide.
They would never put you in that position. I do want to go to the other question that has 5 votes. So it says, as a primary standard-setting body in the global insurance market, do you feel like the IAIS should have the opportunity to be more engaged with the FSB when it comes to insurance-specific initiatives? What's your thoughts?
So actually, it's an interesting question. I would say we have come a long, long way on this topic over the last 5 years or so as well. And actually, that's also largely due to the holistic framework as well, because, as I said, it gives us really a rich empirical basis for our analysis that can also help domestic supervisors. But the other huge benefit of it is it gives us a very strong analytical basis in which to engage with others, including the Financial Stability Board, on many of the cross-sectoral topics that the FSB discusses, and to bring a very clear insurance sector perspective to those discussions. And a lot of the time, it's true, we do have to tell them insurance is different, and make sure you bring you don't forget to bring those specific aspects of insurance into your cross-sectoral discussions. I would say, of course, with our activities-focused approach, the flip side of that is if there are insurers that are doing similar activities to banks or asset managers, then same activity, same supervision, same principles apply. So it's distinguishing between those two, and don't look at it in focus on activities and approach it that way. But what that does mean is that we have now actually a very rich engagement with the FSB. We are I don't think we're short of opportunities for engagement with them. We are represented at the plenary level, on each of the committees. We're also actually active participants in many of the working groups that underpin those committees, particularly those, of course, who are working on issues that are relevant to the insurance sector, like the work that's going on around margin preparedness, the work that's going on around liquidity risk, etc.
So another question that's on the Slido that I couldn't see before because it was rolled up above was, and this can be for any of you, do you regard the rising nationalism to be a potential threat to IAIS efforts? Anybody want to take that on?
I mean, I'm happy to say I haven't seen it. I mean, we've been through waves before, cycles, and based on a history, and I can sort of actually talk about history quite a lot now, I realize, sort of 15 years of engagement in the IAIS. I think supervisors are really, it's an interesting place. It's a valuable institution, the IAIS, because the supervisors come together with really common ethos, common objectives, and I think find ways to work together on shared objectives, even when the politics may vary over time.
Yeah. So I'm going to try and hit two more here. You mentioned, Jonathan, you spoke about one of the high priorities that hopefully will be accomplished is the adoption of the International Capital Standard. And of course, for those of us in the U.S., it's important that the aggregation method be included. So does that mean you see that aggregation, this is putting you on the spot, do you see that being accepted?
So I see the question there also around inclusion in ComFrame. I mean, I think what we all agree on is that there is only one global standard, which is the ICS, and that will be the quantitative element of ComFrame. What we've also agreed on, way back in 2019, is that we will also look at the aggregation method as being an alternative implementation of the ICS, which, and that particularly we're saying, well, let's look at whether the aggregation method produces comparable outcomes to ICS. So it doesn't have to be the same as ICS. We know it's different. We will look at whether it produces comparable outcomes, and if so, it will be recognized as an outcomes equivalent implementation of the ICS.
Well, we'll look forward to that. So I want to ask Siham, and Susan, if you want to contribute to this, you can, because of being in so many markets that you are. But should the IAIS be more, or what should we be doing more with emerging markets? Is there additional efforts that we should be?
So my understanding from the question was if the IAIS should more focus on emerging markets. Right. And what I would like to say here is that we are all members and we are learning from each other. It's important. And the IAIS shown that the engagement with EMD members is a priority for the association. First of all, there is a position of vice chair in charge of EMD market that I'm representing here. I do reports to EXCO on matters concerning EMD. This reflects the importance that the IAIS attached to making sure that the voice of the EMDs is heard at EXCO, but also that the priorities of these supervisors are among those of the association. So for me, it's a work of all group, of all jurisdictions, and we are really happy to learn from each other.
Sure. Anything you want to add, Susan, or you're good?
I mean, from an outsider observing, it seems the IAIS is doing quite a good job of supporting the diversity of its membership. And I think, the best practice sharing that takes place within an organization like the IAIS is critical for everyone. And, we certainly are constantly learning. We're a U.S. headquartered company, and we're learning all of the time from our businesses in emerging markets and the innovation that's happening, and we benefit from the perspectives of a range of the markets that we participate in as well, and it looks like the IAIS does a good job of that.
Wonderful. So Jonathan, I'll ask you the last question, and we have just barely over a minute left, but first of all, I want to recognize you for your outstanding leadership over the years. You are kind and genuine and good to work with. Go ahead if you want to applaud. Really, you've done a great job in helping us set the course, both in the past and now in the next 5 years. So what advice would you give future leaders that are working their way through?
Well, we're looking like beyond the next 5 years, and I said I feel like a piece of furniture. I think I'd be an antique by then. So, but I would say one thing, which is I think let's recognize and value what I almost think of like the dual nature of the IAIS. So one is we are very much a member-based association, very much like the NAIC. We're there to support our members, and a lot of what we've been doing over the last 5 years has been about that, helping supervisors to do their job of supervision better, especially in the face of these big global trends. And that will continue to be it should and must continue to be a key focus. The second one is the second part of the dual role is the IAIS as a key part of the global financial architecture. And by that I mean we are now, I think, a much more recognized and respected global standard setting body that has a table around these global tables with the Financial Stability Board, the other standard setting bodies feeding into G20, G7 political debates. And I think we need to continue to protect that credibility that we've built up as part of that global financial architecture, which means keeping investing in our analytical abilities, our global risk assessment, and our empirical-based work. And I think a combination of those two will set any future leader in good stead.
Good advice. So Jonathan and Siham and Susan, thank you for your contributions. I'm honored to share the stage with you. Please give a round of applause to our guests.